Well, after almost 20 years, the Afghanistan war is coming to an end. President Biden has announced his decision to remove US troops, with Scott Morrison today announcing that Australia will follow suit. What does it all mean for stability in the Afghanistan region? To discuss the fallout, I'm joined now by my international panel. From the US Capitol itself, the Washington correspondent with the Australian newspaper, Adam Credin, joins me. And in Sydney, one of your favourites here on Sky News, host of Outsiders, James Morrow. And I will start with you because you've written about Joe Biden's decision regarding the troops. It'll all happen around the 20th anniversary of September 11 later this year. So I'm interested in how this will play out, do you think, in the United States?
Yeah, look, well, certainly giving the date kind of out in advance gives an advantage to, to the enemy, so to speak. But I think most people in the US do support the decision. I mean, the reality is they've been there 20 years, and something which I think is not widely known is that, the cost is $25 billion a year, year after year, to have those 2,500 troops there. And, you have to look at the state of the US budget at the moment. It's just a disaster. So I think the economic considerations are also there in the background. But, both Democrats and most Republicans, I think, support. I mean, after all, President Trump, former President Trump, his plan was to have the troops out by the 1st of May, so even sooner than the Biden administration. So, look, I think it's broadly bipartisan support.
I remember, James, working in the Howard government at the time we went in after September 11. I'm sure you've got memories of that pretty horrific date. We haven't won the war on terror. Of course we haven't. It's still very present, particularly in Europe. And when the PM got emotional today, he talked about one of the diggers killed and their unborn child, who's now been born and growing up, going to school with one of his daughters, and 41 Australians dead. Their families will never have them back. This is nothing compared in terms of life and blood and treasure to the US cost of the war, but it's still very significant in Australian terms as well.
Yeah, well, look, it is absolutely, Peta. And I think, to echo what Adam was saying before, I think this is the right decision, but done in basically the worst possible way. Telegraphing the date that you're going to wind up leaving is bad. Making that date September 11th, the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, and saying we're going to pull out then, well, that's a message, I think, that's going to be read in the Middle East among America's foes and, among terrorist elements as basically an indication that they won. That's very depressing, I think, for the US. But also, I would say, the danger of this is if you go into a place for 20 years, you're going to forget why you were there. They call Afghanistan the graveyard of empires for a reason. The British came to grief there. The Soviets came to grief there. And they went in there with a lot more force and a lot less in the way of rules of engagement than we ever did. And they couldn't establish rule over the place. And it became this sort of thing where it went from terror to democracy to women's rights and sort of social work and all of this. And we forgot why we were there, and you have to ask why we stayed there so long, especially after Osama bin Laden was killed.
Yeah, and the resurgence of the Taliban. I mean, I went to Afghanistan 3 times with various politicians, and there were enormous gains for women, enormous gains, but the Taliban's absolutely back in control by and large. Let's go to this issue about the Ukrainian border, Russia marshalling troops. I mean, to me, it's a portent of things to come. We saw it in and around the shooting down of MH17 not so long ago. Biden says he's invited Vladimir Putin to meet him for a summit in a third country. Adam, this Crimean issue, I'm not so sure, you convince me if you can, I'm not so sure that Biden is not just willing, but indeed able to step into some sort of summit with someone as wily as Putin, is he?
Yeah, look, I think that's right. And just to give you an idea of scale, it's now thought that Russia has about 80,000 troops along the border with Ukraine, whereas we were just discussing, the 2,500 that the US had in the Middle East. But yeah, look, the bargaining hand here is definitely with Russia in this situation because of all those troops they have there, and the US is so stretched in general, and many experts in Washington are a little puzzled by this idea of a summit because it's not really clear what the US hopes to get out of it. There are so many disagreements between the US and Russia across many dimensions. Whether it's the Middle East, whether it's arms limitations, and it's not clear what the US position is. So certainly this will provide a lot of pictures for the media, but it's not clear how it's going to improve the situation between the US and Russia.
I tell you, Putin will have him for dinner. James, in my experience in the past, I've been there around G20s and things, the one person, because she grew up in East Germany, of course, that's been able to sort of constrain, if anyone can, Putin has been Angela Merkel, but she's soon to retire, and that's really going to change the dynamics in Europe, isn't it?
Well, yeah, she is set to retire, and, you know, she also wasn't 100% pure when it came to Russia. You know, they've wound up under Merkel, getting rid of a lot of their nuclear power and things that would have been energy independence for them, while also getting on board with the Nord Stream 2 project, which allows Russia to essentially turn the tap on and off of Germany's gas. So, you know, Russia has the whip hand here, and I don't know what Biden really is thinking here. He's going up against a master chess player, and I worry that Biden's going to be playing tiddlywinks.